one of the things that I've been meaning to talk about that's been on my mind, and it's a central focus, and I think Cynthia will have a lot to talk about this, is that the stated objective of many of these movements, social justice movement, the stated, the apparent, the face of it is entirely different from what they are, who's financing, and what they're really all about. And this goes for Black Lives Matter, LGBT issues, environmental issues. It looks like literally every single one of these thousands of entities are fake. All of them are fake. Cynthia?
Well, that's a good place to start. And in fact, I've always said that I've always characterized myself as a revolutionary, but I want it to be my revolution. You know, I don't want it to be somebody else's revolution. And in the 1960s, we almost succeeded in having that popular people's revolution that was anti-war and pro-social justice. And we saw what the Department of Justice, the CIA, and all of them did under the guise of COINTELPRO and all of the other, programs that they had out there. But basically, the FBI said, we want to neutralize the leaders of these organizations, and that meant everything up to and including killing them. And so we had the decade of the 60s, beginning with the JFK assassination in '63, ending with the '69 assassination of Fred Hampton, and basically they destroyed our revolution. That's the revolution I want to get back to. You're absolutely right that something that's paid for by a billionaire, well, it's subject to the whims of the billionaire. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately for Black Lives didn't matter until George Soros said Black Lives Matter. So that means that Black lives still don't matter. Despite an injection of $30 million plus from Soros and various other deep state entities.
Sure. I mean, one of the things.
Harry, let me just insert here. I want to insert the cover. Angie, insert the cover of Daniel Estelin's Tavistock. Cynthia, I just want to insert the comment that based on my secondary readings, not on my practical experience as a spy, the CIA had a lot to do with handing out drugs at Woodstock and creating an entire drugged up generation. They also took over the rap industry and started using rap lyrics to try and create violent Black youth. So it looks to me like President Trump needs someone like Michael Flynn that can purge the intelligence community of all of these counter-revolutionary elements. Now let me hand it back to you, Harry.
I'm not going to hold my breath for Trump to do anything. Trump is completely co-opted. So this idea that Trump is going to come in, like what Q is saying, save the day. No, it's not going to happen. Trump will never identify the Israeli problem. Never. He's going to say China. He'll say it's Iran. He'll say it's anything but Jewish banking power. So the holding your breath for Trump, forget it. Not going to happen.
Could it be that QAnon has said Zionists last?
Bullshit. That's why, and you know what that means? That means Zionists never. And that means don't worry about those. Pay no attention to the Zionists. We'll get to them at the end. Why would they have to do that? What would be the point of that?
Why did Ghislaine Maxwell fly back to New Hampshire and turn herself over to the FBI?
I don't know where she was. I have no idea that she flew back. I wasn't aware of where she was.
It's reported that she's been arrested in New Hampshire.
I know she'd been arrested. You said, why did she fly back? I don't know.
She was last reported in Paris.
I thought she was last reported in L.A. at that cafe.
No, that was several months ago.
Yeah. I don't know how she could have left the country.
Maxwell came back to be part of a show trial. And she will either fake her suicide and be extradited to Israel, or she will get a presidential first-class ticket back to Israel when she served her purpose. So you, Harry, wanted to talk about the Israelis setting Trump up. Why don't you lay that out, since that's on your heart right now?
Well, look, the bottom line is that this pandemic, this contagion that's been released, it's not a not an accidental release. The first, there's two layers of the onion of that story. First, it was out of a wet market, but then they knew all along they would shift it over to, it escaped from the Wuhan lab. Okay, so that was placed at the Wuhan lab by Israeli intelligence. The reason why, and subsequently moved throughout the world by Israeli intelligence, and I'll tell you why it's Israeli intelligence. Because U.S. intelligence doesn't have people that are so bereft of a shred of decency like Israeli intelligence does. They have that sort of hermetically sealed sense of supremacy and of loyalty that they're the only ones who could pull this off. But why is Israeli pulling the plug on the American project? Well, simple. They see their window of opportunity closing. Leftist liberals have woken up because of the age of information, and they say, well, this is a bigoted, a racist, xenophobic apartheid state. Screw this. And so they're shifting to the neocons and the evangelical Christians for their support. Well, they also have stolen all the technology, so there's nothing left to steal. They stole all the technology, microcomputer technology, all the military missile technology, everything. There's nothing left to steal. And so what they're doing is they're selling that technology to China, and now they're going to be moving their banking operations and to suck China dry next, because that's what Israeli is about, sucking countries dry for the City of London, House of Rothschild. Ultimately, people say, oh, it's not House of Rothschild. Well, no. Every single mafia kingpin has a bunch of capos. And so all these capos and all these other banking institutions and the Bank of International Settlement and the central bank, yeah, they all take their brokerage fee, or let's say their VIG or their cut or whatever you want to call it, right? But there is a central power, and this is the City of London, and Israel is just another instrument in the power of the money of that.
Take a pause and let Madame McKinney, Dr. McKinney, tell us what she thinks.
Well, I absolutely don't disagree with Harry. I think Harry is right on target. And I would just say that the Samson option, I always bring up the Samson option, but I think that's exactly what we're seeing right now is the Samson option.
Yes, 100%. Thank you very much. That's what's happening. They're pulling the plug because they see their window closing fast, and they would rather, and you have to understand too, that when they do an international pandemic, right, they're largely insulated. There's no proof that there's been a lot of affecting of Israel. They're largely insulated, and their whole thing is, oh, we're going to rescue everybody, and we're going to provide clean water for you, and then we're going to be the next manufacturing hub for your electronics because we're going to save the day. That's what they're up to. And I remember how this worked because I had top secret security clearance when I worked at Grumman Aerospace as a young man. And I remember we had to buy this garbage from Israel. I think the name of the company was P-Tech back then. I don't know. Okay, I know because P-Tech is later. This is in the early 80s. I don't know if it's. I don't know if it's the same.
Yeah, that was Indira Singh. P-Tech. Which ended up being a part of the whole scandalous affair of spying.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about it is that back then, this was hardware, though. We had to buy these, this was in the early days when the PC first emerged, so 1980, 1981. And then we were forced to buy this P-Tech version of it. Right. And now, and when you look at all these Israeli companies, they do everything, and we could get into some modern problems here in the United States of these Israeli companies that, one particular Aaron Berger, who's behind the Sunrise Movement, which is a fake social justice environmental movement. He runs a paramilitary. He's an Israeli intelligence, runs a paramilitary base of operations in North Florida and in I think And if in a few states, he's got thousands of acres. They train children and young people and cops how to use assault rifles. And he's behind Jamal Bowman and the Sunrise Movement, which Jamal Bowman claims it was instrumental, and it was, because they basically hypnotize young people to what they're doing is they're brainwashing with neurolinguistic programming young people to think that they are soldiers for the environment, and when in fact they're a political action group disguised as environmentalists. But back to
so
P-TECH.
Basically, so you're saying that Jamal Bowman, who has been heralded as having defeated the Israel First or Elliot Engel, is actually in line, having been appointed by other Israel Firsters.
That's exactly right. And
oh my gosh, it's typical. It's typical, though. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, it's very scary. And so you have to look at all these groups that are financing this change. And I have to ask myself, well, why in the world would an Israeli intelligence group get rid of their cash cow, Elliot Engel? I mean, this guy was definitely dependable. I think what it boils down to is they know that they can't get away with the same crap forever with their Jewish face, the white face, the middle class, the white middle-aged face. They need to use gay, black, female, and preferably all three to push the same agenda that they used to push. So.
Well, that's exactly what Obama's purpose was. So it was the same old folk, but with a different face. And unfortunately, I saw people all over the world, they were literally crying because they thought that the United States had turned a new page. And in fact, it was the same old page, the same old story. Yes.
Within his very first act as president was $600 million to the Jewish bankers, basically.
And the overthrow of Zelaya in Honduras. Remember, that was his first regime change, too. So, overthrowing the people's will.
Exactly. So this is what it is. I mean, and he was also, his foreign policy came from my mentor, Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was my mentor at Columbia University, and it was Barack Obama's mentor too in terms of that. So when Brzezinski is the guy who's taking you by the hand for the foreign policy, you're establishment, man, 100%. But back to and again, I would say that we need to do a pretty big reach out to Jamal Bowman to say, look, you're in power now, and I think there needs to be a courageous, because I've seen with I've gotten in front of a group of people with a bullhorn, white folks in a small town USA, and said,
I saw the video.
Okay, thank you. I said, enough of Israel. Cut them off. Cut them off. Cut them off.
And you got applause.
Big applause. And so Jamal Bowman in the South Bronx and the Middle Bronx, I'm sure he could get a very big applause. So even if he decides to be the very first congressman, well, you were the first one to have courage, Albert, but even if he said, you know what, they put me here, I know that, they put me here, but I am not going to vote for 1 penny of that $38 billion. I'm going to stand against more weapons to this country, even if they poured $100 million against him. If he gets out with that bullhorn and says, you just ignore this $100 million, he'll win it. He'll win it,
Well, I would hope that he would win it. But I was pretty strong in my district and pretty much loved by the people in my district. But unfortunately, they are able with their Hasbara propaganda machine to really turn it on. And I just recently did a poll on my Twitter page, and I asked the respondents, what kind of leadership do you want? So the first possible response was leadership selected for me by the deep state. The second possible response was community-proven, community-tested leadership. The third possible response was, I don't know the difference. 46% of the respondents said they didn't know the difference. So therein lies our problem, that people don't know that there's a difference between me and a Denise Majette. They don't know that there's a difference between me and Hank Johnson. And so when you've got this preponderance of negative media being spewed out, just as it was with Muammar Gaddafi, again with, the way they do it, and they do it here against the elected leaders who are the elected representatives who are chosen by the people, then the people get confused and they don't know, notwithstanding the fact that I was in my district every year. I mean, every weekend I was bringing money home like you couldn't believe. In fact, in 2000, the last time I served was 2007. And the state of Georgia still has money that they have not spent that I got for my constituents. So I was bringing home the bacon, as they say. I was bringing home the representation. I was exposing the corruption in Washington, D.C., exposing the swamp before, people knew it was a swamp. And they got me. So if they can get me, they can get anybody. And that's what those people up there in Washington, the ones who were there when I was there, that's what they know. And so no one wants to end up like me. So then you do what they tell you to do. And I can give you another.
Hold on, I'm the host. I feel like I'm trapped between two radicals that make me look like
You're breaking up, Robert. I can't hear you.
I hear you both. Now, from where I sit, the United States does not do counterintelligence because the Zionists own the U.S. intelligence community, and they own the FBI, and they own the National Security Agency, and they own the Central Intelligence Agency, and John Brennan and Gina Haspel specifically are Zionists.
And the U.S. military and the policy makers in both the executive and legislative branches.
Now, let me throw a curve here. I have reliable information that says that John F. Kennedy Jr. is alive and is going to appear at Mount Rushmore on the 4th of July.
I think that's that Q business, and I don't think the Q business has any place in a.
I don't want to waste too much time on this.
Is there any possibility?
No.
That after John F. Kennedy was assassinated, patriots started organizing toward the day when they could take America back?
Look, let me tell you something. At the time of the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., 30% of the respondents to, I don't think it was Gallup, but one of the other great big huge posters, said that Dr. King deserved what he got. And so you've got this attitude in the United States, once the propaganda machine has vilified you, then they're literally laying the groundwork for your quote unquote neutralization, which is the word that the FBI used, which basically just means your murder, your political murder, your spiritual murder, your physical murder, but they're eliminating you from the political scene. And so
the assassination of Donald Trump and Joe Biden winning.
I didn't get that.
Forecasting the virtual assassination of Donald Trump and Joe Biden winning because the Israeli-controlled mainstream media says it should be so.
Well, Trump is still, first of all, I've seen the polls that say he's losing drastically. Of course, I don't believe them. They're run by Israeli intelligence. So it depends. I don't know. I really don't know.
Well, I remember in 2016 when Trump was running and Fox News did an interview of Newt Gingrich, and Fox was asking, why is it that Trump is so hated? And Gingrich's response was, well, he hasn't taken a secret oath, and he doesn't belong to any of the secret organizations. So now this was very telling for me that, well, it's an explanation that despite the fact that we might feel that Trump is an insider, but Trump, an insider in terms of being a donor, but donors are not really insiders. Donors are hangers on. And so you have this political class of which Trump is not a member. That's right. So therefore I can see that, yes, Trump would be in danger. In fact, Wayne Madsen reported on a helicopter problem that was encountered in the early days of the Trump administration by Jared and Ivanka. So now this helicopter problem, what was it really? Was it a message? Well, we can get to your loved ones. So who knows what messages Trump has received behind the scenes. And we know that he's been treated no differently than Muammar Gaddafi and Bashar al-Assad and all of the rest of those who are hated. He gets the same treatment.
So let me ask you, both of you, this. I think I find myself in the rare position of saying good things. Trump has not done the outreach to the blacks, and Politico has reported that Trump is depressed and thinking about giving up. I think that's disinformation. I think that's a masterstroke. I think Trump is actually going to roll out his campaign beginning on the 4th of July, and it's going to be boom, 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 to include Epstein disclosure and 9/11 disclosure, which will put pain to the Zionists. The Zionist parasite will be taken down if 9/11 disclosure happens, as the president has promised. And you add to that Epstein disclosure, and the Mossad is going to be run out of town on a rail.
Never. They own the town.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, the Donald Trump campaign for 2020 should have begun on day 1 of 2017, January 20th, 2017. It hasn't materialized. It hasn't happened. So Politico could be absolutely right.
How does America do under Joe Biden? Is that like the Israelis just treat us as the trash heap?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Well, how does America do if Trump doesn't win and Joe Biden wins, which I don't think is going to happen? I think Trump is going to win. The question is by how much?
Let me just summarize what Cynthia previously said, and then we'll get to that question. Yes, what Cynthia was talking about is true. The ruling, I don't like to call it the ruling class. I like to call it the ruling power structure, which is different from the ruling class. Ruling class is just the guy who owns a taxi company. He got $1 billion now. He's a big stack, but he doesn't go to Bilderberg and CFR and, all this. So that would be the ruling power structure, of which Trump has no part of it and was never invited to the big room with the big boys. If he did, it was a nightclub or something like that, but not in the halls of real power. And they hate his guts. And the reason why the neocons have to get him out is because if the neocons are out of power, and they, regardless of whether Trump hires a couple of them and keeps them on a short leash like he did with Bolton. And I always said, when people say, well, he's hiring Bolton. No, he wasn't. He was playing a game of symbols with Bolton and keeping him on a short leash and then to yank him out. And I said, he's going to yank him, just like he yanked the other jerk off from down south there. What's his name? The Attorney General. Okay, so what I'm saying is Sessions. I said, he's gonna pull the plug on Sessions. I actually named the day 6 months before. I said, no, he's gonna wait till the day after the midterms and he's gonna pull the plug on Sessions. And he did, but exactly on time. So what I'm saying is that the neocons, largely the crystals, those types, have been out of power. They are CNN hosts now, okay?
Yes, that's
so
right.
That's right. So if you could keep them out of power for 8 years instead of just 4 years, that's a hell of a lot better than just keeping them out for 4 years, because a lot of them are going to die. A lot of them are going to get hemorrhoids so bad that they're going to be worried about that. And before you know it, you've solved a lot of your problem if you could keep these Jewish neocons out for 8 years rather than just 4. So
you just made the case for re-electing Trump. I mean,
of course,
all the rhinos have exposed themselves as now the rhinos led by Cheney are saying they support Joe Biden.
Of course. Look, Bill Kristol has reinvented himself as a social justice warrior. So has John Bolton.
So what you're saying, Harry, is the neocons are telling America, if you vote for Trump, you're putting us out of power.
And if you vote for Biden, the neocons are coming back. I'll tell you that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And that's the scenario facing U.S. voters right now.
Well, it's too complex for them, though, Cynthia. They just hate Orange Man bad. And look, I don't blame them. I think Trump is repulsive, if you ask me. I'm sick and tired of Trump because he hasn't delivered anything, and he's a tool of Israel.
No, he hasn't.
Yeah,
I got to challenge that now. Dr. McKinney, I'm never going to overspeak against you, so I'm listening.
No, I was just saying that Donald Trump, if he had assembled around him a particularly, how can I say, perspicacious team, they would have been able to discern that from day one, Donald Trump, as a minority president who got fewer votes than Hillary Clinton, must reach out to every community in the United States, to every demographic in the United States that votes. He had to do this. And those people around him have failed to deliver. And they have failed to deliver in the nooks and crannies of America. They have failed to deliver to the demographic groups that Trump could have won, because executive power is first and foremost power. And so the power of the executive has not been wielded in such a way that would warrant people to gladly go to the polls and vote for Trump, despite the media.
I want both of you to give me a minute and a half now. Angie, I want you to put up the election, the political landscape of the 70% that are shut out by the two-party tyranny and take my voice away. So put up that graphic from #Unread. Now, I agree with you. Trump was betrayed. He was betrayed by Jared Kushner, who destroyed Chris Christie's transition plan and the 4,000 people that would have replaced all the Obama holdovers that are still there because of Jared Kushner. Number two, the Republican Party under Liz Cheney and the Romney relative have been stabbing the president in the back for the last 3 years. Number three, Brad Parscale and Jared Kushner have been playing a campaign game that's centered on on Parscale getting $50 million of Trump's money and not actually expanding so that the message reached out to the others. Now, let me ask you this, Cynthia. The people from Bernie Sanders and #WalkAway, they've been approaching you saying, what do we do now? What are you telling them?
Well, I can't tell them to run to Trump. I can't tell them that because, unfortunately, Trump hasn't delivered. And he's got a bunch of people around him who are acting like political morons and not reaching out as they should. So the political base hasn't been built. The policy outreach hasn't been done. Under Bill Clinton, Clinton had people in that White House who were touching down to the neighborhood level. Yeah. Every neighborhood of every demographic needed for him to win in the midst of a impending impeachment. It hasn't happened under Trump. And these people claim that
I blame a lot of that on Kushner. I think Kushner is the one.
Well, you know what? The bottom line is no. Trump, the buck stops with Trump because he should never have had Kushner as an executive advisor in the first place.
One thing I'd like to add.
Deal with Israel? Do you think that Israel forced Trump to have Kushner in the White House?
Well, one thing I just wanted to say to cap up that last conversation is that Anybody who's been in this United States since the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s has seen with their own eyes and in their own neighborhoods and in their schools and in their families and the communities, they have seen women's rights improve, race relations improve steadily. Over the years, it's gotten better and better. And I'll say this, that if you go to the hipster sections of Brooklyn or any city in America, there has never been a lesser of a problem of relations between young white and black people. I have never seen lesser of a problem. So now when Trump doesn't give Israeli their wars in Syria and wars in Iraq, and all of a sudden we have a race riot here going on. And I'll say this, that if Trump would have bombed Syria and bombed Iraq, like Iran, like the hardliners in Israel who are forcing his hand to do that, if he had done that, you wouldn't hear a peep about sexism. You wouldn't hear a peep about racism. You wouldn't hear a peep about white supremacy. Look, let me say this about this accusation that there's a white supremacist behind every street corner, behind every sign in every house. Bullshit. Bullshit. Especially with these cops. Look, yes, you'll have garden variety racists. Of course, you find them throughout history. There's nothing that's a common thing among all people. People have an affinity for their own kind. That's a form of racism. Okay, but this idea that we have, and look, I hate cops. Don't get me wrong, and I'm very open. I hate their guts, and I always have and will till the day I die. So I'm not saying anything good about cops here because I hate them. But I'll say this. Okay, but I'll say this, that to think that to all these accusations that these cops are white supremacists, even that doesn't even square up. I think they actually have, if anything, an inferiority complex. I think they know that they're not well put together. They know they're not at the vanguard of our society. They probably have a lot of resentment and a lot of inferiority about that. So the problem is not that we have this, fulminant white supremacists. That is their boogeyman they are using so that we get the attention off the real enemy, which is way up there in that 1%, in the ivory towers, in the top of the corporate structures. That 1%, those billionaires, pay no attention to those. Let's focus on the white supremacists on down the block. Bullshit. Bullshit.
I agree with you, Harry. I think we have a massively funded, carefully orchestrated divide and conquer.
Of course.
This is COINTELPRO in reverse. This is the Israelis running COINTELPRO on everybody. So
I would also just add that one of the main lessons from the COINTELPRO program that we should draw is the fact that these organizations that are purportedly white nationalist and white supremacist organizations basically are mostly intelligence fronts.
FBI.
Not only that.
Operation Gladio, and that's also what happened with COINTELPRO. So let's just understand that. It's
also been documented.
When you see a guy with a swastika at the parade, that's FBI, actually.
That's right. Exactly.
Two out of three hate crimes are fakes. The swastikas on synagogues, the Smirch Black attack in Chicago. I mean, if you're gonna fake an attack by white supremacists, don't hire two black Nigerians. Okay? I mean, it's just how stupid do you want to be? So most of this is bullshit. Now, I'm gonna tell you guys, I think Donald Trump is going to surprise you. And I think we're going to see a house cleaning here.
Bullshit. Bullshit.
I will buy you sushi. I will buy you sushi for two.
No surprises. No surprises from Donald Trump, my friend. No Israel last. No Q realizations. That's all.
If that sushi is from Japan, I don't want it, Robert.
Let me ask you both. Will the election take place on time lawfully?
I love you, Cynthia.
Yeah, he doesn't love me. Okay, I'm a white.
No, look, Robert. But if you're gonna start to claim that Trump's got some surprises for us, listen, I've been holding my breath now, waiting for those surprises.
So that's why you're blue.
So let me ask you both: will the election take place on time?
Well, that's a good question.
I didn't get the question.
Will the election take place on time?
Well, the interesting thing about the whole mail-in election, and it's the same thing about the, and if we could tie that the idea of the verification of various procedures that involve many steps, such as like a mail-in ballot. There are so many ways that the CIA or Israeli can tell you, oh yes, we're going to have special representatives in the post office to handle the security that day to make sure there's no, oh, we're going to have special people driving the trucks with those, there's only about 1,000 insertion points on all this. And this was the same thing with the virus, the tests and the various vaccines which were given in the months prior to this pandemic, and that we've seen batches. Oh, they find batches that were bad and tainted. They weren't bad and tainted. They weren't accidentally tainted. Sorry, no. There are so many insertion points for all of these deep state actors to put themselves in the way. Now they're saying, Cuomo's saying, oh yes, we're going to test everybody and we're going to shove swabs up your nose. Again, there's 1,000 insertion points where those swabs will have the virus on them.
Going to infect you. So when you're tested, you are infected by the test. So let me ask both of you, other than extraterrestrials and God Almighty, is there anything good in the United States from which we might build out?
Cynthia, I'll let you start on that one.
I think there's a lot of good in the United States. And I think our young people who have been pulled into what they think is a revolution, and they think they're creating a revolution, and it happens to just be somebody else's revolution. But the ideals that took them into this street action are marvelous. And as Harry has said, there's no way you can say that there hasn't been progress. So I think, though, that what we have to do is I don't know how to defeat the Hasbara, because, that's what got me. And that's what keeps the other elected officials in line. So how do we defeat that? Well, we've got alternative journalists, alternative media, and alternative media helps. We've got Harry, whose voice is incomparable and also necessary. So we've got some key ingredients, but we have got to get to the 25% so we can get the critical mass. Once we get the critical mass of people who believe like us, then change is possible, because we are the ones who are already saying no. We say no to the narrative. But what Jacques Rancière tells us is that when the say no, and we are the unimportant, unheard, invisible, we're the unimportant people in the political scheme of things. But the moment we say no is the moment when the possibility for the emergence of a transformational leader occurs. And that is exactly how we got Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. And so that moment is here with us now. How we utilize this moment, I think, is really one that will determine whether the deep state wins or whether we win.
Either of you accept an invitation from Donald Trump to coffee?
What's the question?
Do you accept an invitation from Donald Trump to sit down and have a cup of coffee?
Of course. I mean, I would accept an invitation with anyone. I mean,
Tell the president, assuming, from where I sit, a president who is in power running for re-election has a lot of golf clubs that they can use, even in the last 3 months. So Harry,
no, he has a lot of golf clubs that should have been used 3.5 years ago.
I know that, but that's past. Let's focus on the next 4 months.
I'm gonna let that be past, because what? Past is the present and
We have 4 months. We have 4 months to decide whether America is going to become a Zionist trash heap or eradicate the Zionist parasite and create America the Beautiful again. We have 4 months. So, Harry, what would you tell the president he needs to do in order to eradicate the Zionist parasite and play to the advantages that he has?
This being a Trump-centric conversation or issue, I think is we have to speak to people. Trump is not going to do anything. We have to have a new language about this issue. First of all, I would encourage people that if you have a leader, so-called leader, and they've taken one single penny from Israel or any of these Jewish banks or any of this stuff, that they're disqualified. Get them out. That's what I'm saying. Out. Get them out. Okay. Now, that's something that people can actually understand. They can keep it their secret.
They don't have the entire Congress, with the possible exception of Rand Paul.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. All incumbents must go. All of them. There is no.
Trump isn't planning that.
What?
How do you know Trump isn't planning?
Trump is a major part of the problem, because Trump, as the commander-in-chief, could have told us all these things. I think it's inconceivable that Trump doesn't know that. I think it's inconceivable that Trump really believes that China did this thing and that Israel is a good actor. I think that's inconceivable.
Well, what he did during the 2016 campaign, he actually went in front of AIPAC and he told them, "You're millionaires, you don't need the money, and I don't need your money," which is something that they didn't like. And I think part of engendered part of this backlash that he's had for the last 3.5 years.
The ADL is in charge of censoring Trump and conservatives across all social media problems. It's the Zionists who are censoring conservatives.
And liberals.
They are censoring progressives like Charlie the black woman from Atlanta. Yeah.
I'm as left liberal as you're going to get.
I didn't know that.
I think I beat you, Harry. I think I'm a little bit more left.
I'm right of center. I'm proud of it.
I've always...
And we both... And so, yes, we face the censorship too. Yeah.
So what 3 things have to happen? I mean, from where I sit, #unrig, which Cynthia and I co-founded, #unrig election reform is the obvious starting point. Whether Trump likes it or not, I think he has to play that card. What do you think?
Well, you're hung up on election reform, and we definitely need election reform. But Trump is the president right now, and I would say to him, end the wars and bring the troops home. That's one of the biggest ways to defeat the deep state, is to stop the military-industrial complex, and he's been trying to do that. But they rear their ugly heads in the form of establishment Republicans and the Democratic Party. So now we know, it's not a secret who the warmongers are, but he still should make certain orders. He's the commander-in-chief, and he should act that way, and then expose those who are recalcitrant against peace.
No,
let me ask you a question. What, I guess I'm curious, why are we speculating or suggesting what Trump can do? Do we have a direct? Is this show being watched by Trump? If it's not, our speculations on what Trump should or should not do are absolutely meaningless, because, I mean, unless you have some information that I don't know of, that people in the deep state are going to get this information to Trump, then what's the point?
Let me say that again. I have a lot of information that you don't know, to include everything that we've got in the NSA databases that Trump is in the process of harvesting. So
Well,
Give
we
me a
hope
break.
he's in the process of harvesting it, but we
Give-
don't know. We literally don't know.
All right.
But
Give
Harry is
the
right.
president a
In
break. Come on.
one sense, Harry is right that Trump, we can say safely, speculatively, that Trump knows certain things. And not just because we think, but we can say that Trump knows certain things because of what Trump himself has said in the past. So,
Michelle, I
we
feel
know-
like I've been taken over. This is the Republic of Jazz. I've lost control here. Look, Donald Trump is
well,
president.
maybe you never had control.
No, I never had control. You're absolutely right, Cynthia. Let's not go to where all the body parts are. So, Donald Trump is president. Harry, if Cynthia ever comes near you, you better wear a barrel. Okay.
I would never do that.
Especially
I
if
would
she's got a
never do
machete
that
in her
to
hand.
Harry.
Okay,
No,
look.
Harry is my compatriot.
Trump is president. That is a fact. And I'm not going to go, I mean, your 3,000 people that voted for Hillary is right up there with the Holocaust in terms of fake numbers. Okay? So Trump is president. I think he's going to be reelected, but by a very thin margin, which will be contestable. He might lose the Senate. He's going to be a gridlock for 4 years. I think the country needs for Trump to be reelected by the mother of all landslides and take back the House. So
Well, it needs to be a different Trump. It needs to be a different Trump.
A different Trump. Cynthia and then Harry, tell me what kind of different Trump would make that happen.
One, a Trump that's surrounded by people who understand the power of the executive branch and who also understand the need to work with the legislative branch. There are thought that there are going to be perhaps several Supreme Court appointments. I think it's vitally important that deep state actors are not appointed to the Supreme Court for the rest of their lives.
But you just made the case for Trump.
Well, I would make the case for a different Trump.
Okay,
And so that
tell
Trump
me
has
more
got
about
to be a
different
smarter
Trump.
Trump, a more independent Trump, and he's got to have smarter advisors around him. He's
Name
got
three people that can replace Jared Kushner, other than yourself, because we know that we need you there. Name three people that Trump's not talking to that can help him politically. And I certainly do not want Bozy anywhere near this campaign. I think Bozy is completely compromised, and so is Lewandowski. So name three people that actually have their act together, and not Rollins, who's making a fortune running a super PAC so he can take his 10%.
I honestly don't know. I mean, speculating about like who, like this fantasy stuff about what our dream Trump scenario.
It's not a fantasy that Joe Biden could be given this election by theft.
Yes, but me telling you what I think would be a great pick, that great Trump picks, is kind of an exercise.
Asking Cynthia because you don't know.
It's not that I don't know.
He didn't say he doesn't know.
It's not that I don't know. It's just that
Harry knows the street. I think you know the politics. So, Cynthia, what three things does Donald Trump have to do as we draw to a close here in what has been a mud wrestling festival that I wasn't expecting? I feel like I'm back in Woodstock. So what three things, Cynthia, we'll give Harry the last word. What three things do you want from Donald Trump so that you will feel like America's getting back on track?
Well, I would like to see the president trust his instincts a little more and end the wars. So I would like to see our troops coming home. That's one thing. I would like to see infrastructure investment because, you and I drove across the country and the roads were in horrible condition. So we need investment in our roads, and we are seeing bridges collapse. So we need investment in bridges. Atlanta just came off of a boil water advisory. So we need investment in our water infrastructure. So I would say that definitely we need the infrastructure Marshall Plan to, in fact, the civil engineers routinely give the United States a D in its infrastructure. So we need that. And I would say something along the lines of, well, actually, I'd also like to see him release the remaining JFK papers, because that'll tell us a lot about who is
and
in
do 9/11
those that are
disclosure
still alive.
and pardon the Black Panthers.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
There's a lot to be done. I'm not giving up on Trump, but Harry, please take my word for it that somehow some of this stuff is going to get to Trump.
Okay, in my fantasy world,
yes,
the fantasy world was have a serious investigation on who did this pandemic, because honestly, that's the immediate threat to our future right now. So if it's not hard to figure out who did this.
No, I would like to see Fauci and Gates' heads on.
Of course, expose them all, throw them all in jail. So there's fantasy number one.
But that's not a fantasy, Harry, because
but Harry's on a roll, Cynthia, so let him go.
Trump instructed his health staff, executive staff for health, to investigate the presence of the 4 HIV inserts into the SARS coronavirus 2 virus. So Trump is definitely aware of that, because I've seen the letter. Actually, the letter is on Robert's website, and it's in my book about coronavirus coming out. So you're absolutely right that we need an investigation of this pandemic. Next one, Harry.
Yeah, let me just, Harry, before I give it back to you, let me say that when I wrote the original article, which blamed the Zionists for the Wuhan outbreak, it's at tinyurl.com/Steele-Wuhan. I nailed it. I called it. Now, Harry, I said the president has to do a counterintelligence investigation. Here's the problem. He is being rolled by the FBI, the NSA, the CIA, and so forth. He doesn't have anybody with a combination of big brain and big balls.
Here's the second fantasy solution. Here's the second fantasy solution. No sitting member of the U.S. military or intelligence or Senate staff or House, DIA, DOD, NSA, FBI, not a single member can be allowed to join a think tank and get paid by a think tank, which is Israeli intelligence disguised as a think tank, like FDD or the whatever they call it. The Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. This is a Israeli intelligence operation, and they own and control Michael Hayden, who is the former NSA chief, senators. So all those people have to be asked. You need to make a decision. Do you work for the United States or do you work for Israel? If you work for the United States, you have to leave your position. You have to get out of that. Or go get the fuck out of here. Go to Israel, right? Go to Israel, man. Get the fuck out. But you have to make a decision, and then it has to be a law. No, it's against the law for a current and future. So that means if you are a major person in the intelligence agency, you are not allowed to work for Israel to lobby your former agency, because that's another problem. So if Trump wants to be serious, and believe me, you'll get a lot of support, because all you have to do is tell all these other military personnel, okay, there's 6 million of you. Are all 6 million of you getting paid by Israel? Oh, you're not? Oh, you mean just these select ones at the top are getting, oh, I see. Okay, so if you're going to fucking pay us all, that's fine. How much are they getting?
Harry, go on to fantasy number 3.
Fantasy number 3 is finally open the books on 9/11. You do that, and if those 3 things happen, then, of course, the American people are going to have their pitchforks out, right? They're going to stick them in their leader, their Zionist piece of shit, leader, whatever you want to call him, right? I call him a Zionist piece of shit. They're going to get their pitchforks out and stick it right in, and that'll be the end of this mess, this Israeli mess that is destroying the planet Earth and destroying the future of your mother and your sister and your son and your daughter and your family and everybody. It's the evil that's destroying the future. So if we are going to deal with it, we have to deal with that threat to everything.
I understand that. And before I turn it over to Dr. McKinney for the last gracious word of the show, I do want to distinguish between Zionism and Judaism.
No, you can't, because the bottom line is it's Jewish privilege. It's Jewish supremacy. These people aren't Zionists, and they're not Israeli. These people are using the Jewish religion, and this is what it is, this language game we have to play that we're being told that, oh, no, we can never use the J word. We have to use a Z, and those are the incorrect words. This is people who are using the fact that they're claiming they are Jewish. They are using that to gain positions of power, and until you accept that these are not Zionists, these are not Israeli, this is a Jewish problem, definitely.
Right. Let me say two things about that before turning it over to Dr. McKinney. Number one, the power of Zionism in the United States is not based on 9 million Jewish voters. They're far outnumbered by all the other voters. The power of Israel in the United States is based on bribery and blackmail. And Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell are, in my view, together with 9/11 disclosure, how President Trump is going to take them down. Let me respectfully say to you, Harry, I think 90% of the Jews do not support Zionism. And like Marjorie Kahn, who wrote a very famous article, which said progressive, less Palestine does not cut it. So give Cynthia the last word, Harry. I think we've done very well in this wrestling contest. So, Dr. McKinney, my plan here is to have you speak for 2 minutes, and then I'm going to turn the recording off. Close the show.
Why?
Well,
it's a lot of unfinished business here, Robert.
Yes,
Go ahead.
yeah, that's
We'll
right. A lot
again.
of unfinished business. So
We'll do this again when we're in the same room together. Cynthia, what have you heard?
Oh, that
today?
would be fabulous.
What have you heard here today?
Well, Harry, I'm going to see you shortly. I'll see you in about a week or so. Yeah.
And we're going to go to Fire Island and enjoy a nice boat ride.
Okay,
so
fabulous.
Dr. McKinney, here we've been in this mud wrestling thing. What has anything good come out of this 1 hour?
Yeah, I got a chance to meet Harry, and I'm stoked about that.
Wear a barrel, Harry. And if she's got a machete in her hand, run.
She's
Harry.
a hero. She's a hero of mine, and you've been a hero of mine, Cynthia, for all these years since the very first moment I discovered you 20-something years ago. Major.
No, that means we've been fighting a long time, Harry, and I just hope one day we're able to sing the victory song.
I see you both in the Lincoln bedroom in the next term. So, Dr. McKinney, do you have a final word for us?
No, just no, not really.
All right, I'm pleased with what we've done because I think Harry has come out with some very authentic, very deep feelings that are repressed and censored across America. I expect YouTube to censor this video, but it will be on BitChute before they do. So this video will be posted, and I will maintain it in my collection.
One final thought too. I am not an anti-Semitic person. I find Jews to be some of the most interesting and fascinating and wonderful people to talk to. And I don't want to alienate my Jewish friends. And I worry about the things that I say that might cause harm and cause hurt. But the fact remains that there is a privilege that is there. It's undeniable. And when we're getting rid of and we're expunging all forms of supremacy and privilege, we better start addressing that one too.
When 2% of the population is Jewish and 60% of the students at Harvard are Jewish, there's something going on here. I think the fix has been put in. And Jared Kushner is a third-rate intellect. And he got into Harvard, and a girl in his class who was at the top of her class did not get into Harvard, and she was in tears because she knew that Jared Kushner's dad bought his way into Harvard. So, Dr. McKinney, I've heard that Herman Cain is in the hospital, and you are in Atlanta with him. I pray that Herman Cain is not murdered by the hospital putting him on a ventilator so they can collect their $39,000 instead of their $9,000 for saving his life. Let me just say, this has been a real ride with you two guys. And if I ever am in a room with both of you together, I'm going to have a bodyguard.
That's right, because it'll be 2 against 1.
Right. God bless you all.